Thank you. Thank you. Please have a seat. I'm Brett Pulley, and I'm the Atlanta Bureau Chief at Bloomberg News. I'm joined here to my immediate left is Ankita Agarwal from Kimberly-Clark. To her left, Kevin Dehoff from Honeywell. And to Kevin's left, Mallory Freeman from UPS. Welcome. So NVIDIA has a market cap of $3 trillion. And Jensen Huang has a personal net worth in excess of $100 billion, enough to buy plenty of those cool leather jackets. And I guess it's game over, right? We can all go cower in fear of the robots. But in all honesty, everyone now is rushing to respond to the rapid emergence of AI, and all three of our panelists are actually from companies all over 100 years old, and all have been leveraging advanced technologies really for some time. So, Ankita, with that, I'd love to start with you, and you can offer us some hope. How has Kimberly-Clark applied machine learning in its businesses?
Yeah, so I would broadly categorize Kimberly-Clark, for the matter of fact, any CPG right now who is categorizing AI, ML in 3 to 4 broad categories, right? The first one is analytics and insight. We at Kimberly-Clark are using AI models for forecasting and really finding out that white space across our revenue generation, our margin management, how and where and which shelf do we promote our products, which is famously known as trade promotion management. So that's one of the biggest area. The second biggest area is the content creation for sales and marketing. We touch lives of 1/4 of world's population every single day through our products. Imagine if we can offer a hyper-personalized offer to each of them, so that they come and buy our products, or we know what's going on in their life and have a very specific shopper marketing event, it would be great. So that's the content creation, the hyper-personalized offer. That's the second area. The third is more on the employee productivity side. Famously, we all know about Copilot. So Kimberly-Clark is also using Copilot for all the employee productivity gains, whether it's writing the minutes of the meeting. I don't have to write it, or my team doesn't have to write it. It's great. Even for things like, finding out what's inside a particular policy document, not going through it, just asking the KC GPT, which we call it, or Copilot, which is very KC specific, and upload that maternity leave policy and ask them, hey, tell me what's the benefits and where I can look into for certain questions that I have. So I guess these are some of the areas. The fourth biggest, I would say, is knowledge management. Asking our teams and our employees to go ahead and, learn through Microsoft Copilot, ask those questions, look at what's the trends going on in the market. So that's probably the fourth biggest area that we are seeing.
That's great. Mal, I'll jump down to you. UPS, does UPS consider itself a tech company? And if so, what are examples that underscore that?
Yeah, perfect. And Brett, love that question. We've had a really fantastic set of talks here today. So I would say UPS is absolutely a technology company, and innovation is truly in our DNA. We've been at this since our founding, like you said, over 100 years ago. Now, what does that innovation look like? Well, different than 100 years ago, but the relentless drive is to improve our customers' experience. And we've got 4 strategic initiatives right now going on that are part of our digital transformation. So we're working with AI and Gen AI, and I work very close to that area, so I've got some exciting examples to share there. We've also got our smart package and smart facility sensing technology. So I know we'll have some good discussion on sensing and kind of where that IoT is going. If you look at how we're also rolling through our network, how do you leverage data? It's also through our digital twins. So having that digital read on what's going on in our operations, actually over 1 billion data points coming in over our operations over a given day. So how do you make a representation of our network, then use that to drive better decisions? And then last is robotics and automation. So how can we make the lives better, our employees' lives better, our customer experiences better, leveraging some of these new technologies. So a lot of different areas to unpack. The way I always like to break it down for folks is that through the technology, you drive business value. You drive business value through creating revenue opportunities, whether that's by having a more curated customer experience, like was brought up, how can you hyper-personalize? Or in our case, how can you proactively sense whether we need to actually go after a customer to make their experience better? How can we prevent churn, for example, or offer a more catered offering across our whole UPS portfolio? So that's revenue. Cost reducing is another huge bucket for us. So whether you've got our core optimization technologies, it's not just all AI, Gen AI, there's analytics, BI, but there's also an entire suite of simulation and optimization driving better routing decisions. And last, and I thought this one came out really well in the last panel in particular, is thinking about reducing risk. So you can create business value by reducing risk. And AI and data are actually some really fantastic ways to do that. With our UPS digital offerings, we've got some fantastic offerings coming out to reduce risks for delivery defense. So how can you make sure that you get a package delivered as a small business or large business working with UPS? So lots to unpack, but yeah, definitely technology is a very exciting place to be right now.
I saw a video over the weekend on the news. I'm not sure where it was, but the driver put the package down on the front porch. And as soon as the driver took his hands off the package, porch pirate ran onto the porch right in front of the driver. The driver's like this, took the package. I don't know if AI can do anything to solve that, but I can't believe the brazenness.
I mean, there's one thing AI can't do, and it's deliver a package. AI, in this case, probably can't prevent that, porch pirate incident, but we have a whole delivery defense suite of technology that could have potentially predicted and then offered, different opportunities like delivering to to one of our UPS stores or other options. So yeah, it's it's a kind of a cat and mouse game, but always looking for digital solutions.
From a customer who has a consistent problem with porch pirates, you guys, AI can tell that and then say, how about if you pick this package up elsewhere?
Yeah, and that dream is the reality, and our fantastic partners at UPS Capital, the insurance branch of our organization, now part of our digital, UPS Digital organization, are doing a lot with data and analytics monetization. That's one of the premier products coming out there. So, yes.
Great. So, Kevin, what are some examples of how Honeywell customers are undergoing transformation to benefit from machine learning?
Yeah, so I lead Honeywell Connected Enterprise, and that's essentially the software part of our portfolio. And as we're working with our customers on the solutions that matter, these solutions are increasingly data-enabled and software-led. And so increasingly, we're embedding machine learning and AI into our products, into our solutions. We largely work with industrial types of customers, and most of those customers are in various stages of a journey to much more intelligent and autonomous operations. And so when we talk about autonomous operations, that doesn't necessarily mean zero people involved in the process, but many of our customers are facing a scarcity of skilled labor. And so they've got to find ways to increase the performance of operations, and the way to do that is to use the data that's being generated. And so, a couple of examples of how we utilize machine learning and AI to deliver those outcomes. The first is around process control optimization. So operational assets are generating lots of data, and you can use that data to further fine-tune and optimize the control processes. Another example is increasingly how we make operational assets more intelligent. So sensors are being embedded in all aspects of our solutions. Again, these assets are generating operational data, and so by using sensors to monitor acoustics or vibration or thermodynamics, you can make asset performance and health much more predictive. You can anticipate and therefore avoid unplanned downtime and increase asset utilization. Another use case for AI is how I mentioned the scarcity of skilled labor. How do we reduce the time to expertise for a worker? And so by utilizing AI, you can increase worker situational awareness, and you can provide guidance. That is how to many jobs in the field come with 30 years of expertise. It takes a long time to develop expertise. And so how do we shorten that time? Well, we provide work guidance and best practices to the worker. And maybe the final example would be increasingly around remote operations. And so how do we increasingly make operations autonomous, and we can therefore optimize not only at a unit or a facility level, but across an entirety of an enterprise. Another example of where remote operations is incredibly important is that it takes workers out of potential conditions that are detrimental to the health and safety of a worker. So think about an offshore oil rig. Very hazardous conditions. It takes time to fly workers back and forth. So the more we can monitor operations and operate those types of facilities remotely, now we take our workers out of harm's way, and we're able to to make that operation much more healthy and much more safe.
It's interesting. So you talked about time to expertise. That's like so.
Yeah.
Well, we used to say the old timers have institutional knowledge right now, but the institutional knowledge can conceivably rest with the robots.
Yep.
Well, the part of the problem I mentioned is the scarcity of skilled labor. There's a whole set of things that our customers. First of all, the demographics are working against us in terms of the age and the composition of the workforce. There's a constant need for higher performance, higher output, but at the same time, a lot of the institutional knowledge is walking out of the door with retirement. And so while we actually have shortages of labor, we also have inexperience, and that I talked about 30 years of expertise walks out of the door. You replace that with someone who doesn't have that level of expertise. So instead of 30 years, how do you reduce that time to expertise and get them to a fully functioning expert as fast as you possibly can? Well, using the data and using AI and providing guidance as to how to conduct a particular task is one way you can do that.
Yeah. It's always a burning question, right? How is this impacting the workforce, the labor market, from your perspective, Ankita? How is this? Is it augmenting the workforce, or is it killing jobs?
It's definitely not augmenting the workforce. What it's taking away is the repetitive task and the administrative task, right? So nobody as a human wanted to do the same task again and again, which is more laborious. So that's what AI comes into picture and does some of those activities. But the output that is generated, and I think in the first session we talked a great thing about AI model and output, the output that's generated, the actions on top of it, what to do next, that's still all human and workforce. So, our CIO famously said that AI can do everything, but can it build brands like Huggies, like our brand? No, it cannot, right? It still has to be people like us, an organization like us, who have to go out and do that. But yes, can it help in creating the content for it or giving us the white space for it? Yes, it can do that, but it cannot replace the workforce at all.
Yeah. So Mallory, will we see robots driving those big brown trucks? I mean, you guys did a great, certainly from the perspective of the union, an amazing contract, right? Last year for drivers. I mean, the pay is so tremendous for starting drivers. If I were a better driver, I would have applied by now. Was that part of the negotiation? Is that a part of the work rules in any way, that are drivers in fact looking for some assurance that they won't be replaced by robots?
Well, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is AI is not going to deliver a package. So we're looking, I agree with augmentation and kind of fully agree that really the promise here is about improving that employee and customer experience. That can be reducing some of the repetitive tasks or potentially, finding ways to innovate, whether it's a cross-border package or make the, quite honestly, make the jobs more safe to operate. So my dad was actually a UPS pilot for 20 years, so definitely have kind of the in-house feel there. And I think technology, whether it was making safer crew schedules or really finding ways to just help the workers that are out there, that's a core focus for us. Yeah.
Yes. So I would like to hear about consumer products a bit and AI. And Ankita, it's my understanding you guys are able to use artificial intelligence to creatively find ways to place products, et cetera. You had mentioned something to me about beer, and which you guys don't sell,
yes,
but beer and diapers, which you do sell.
Yeah.
Please.
So there is a very interesting case study, and if you Google, you'll find it. It goes all the way back to 2012, 2013 sometime, where one of our largest retailers figured out that if you place beer right next to diapers in a city where most of your shoppers are male, aged between 30 to 40, the beer sale will go up by 35%. Why? Because when he goes to buy diaper, he feels a sense of achievement that I've done the task which my spouse asked me to do, and now I can reward myself by buying a beer. So now that was long back when we didn't have AI models and all, but now you pull all that data. A retailer can put all that data, figure out what can be placed next to where, and then, they get all these insights. But this was done with all the manual inputs that they had and some very smart people looking at it, these kind of shoppers and what they are buying together.
Yeah, and with technology today, those kinds of things, I guess you can do.
Yes, yes, definitely.
A recurring theme seems to be safety. And the benefits that come as it relates to safety as a result of AI, and certainly in big industrial settings, safety is so paramount. Kevin, I would think with many of your customers, safety is a major issue. So talk a bit about how AI is enabling customers to enhance safety in the workplace.
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, it comes from what I talked a little bit about earlier, is the more we can use data and intelligence to augment how the worker is conducting their task, but increasingly taking the worker out of hazardous situations and hazardous tasks. I mentioned the offshore oil rig. Another would be, a lot of the field service operations in some, chemical processing plants or oil refineries. To the extent that that we can understand what the data is telling us about the operations, we can either predict anomalies, or when we have an anomaly, we can make the worker more efficient in getting in and out of the situation. So I think that's one aspect of it, is the health and safety of the worker. I will also talk a little bit about security overall, and we talk a lot about living in a connected world and all the great things that you can do by connecting assets, taking data to the cloud, and creating opportunities for operational performance improvement. At the same time, and we operate in an operational environment, at the same time, all those connections represent vulnerabilities for cybersecurity. And that, I believe, is becoming an increasingly important aspect of how we ensure that those operational assets are protected from potential cybersecurity vulnerabilities and threats. And so when you think about it, the bad guys are using AI to get smarter and smarter about, detecting vulnerabilities and taking advantage of them. So we're actually increasingly utilizing AI to ensure that we understand what those vulnerabilities are. And in an operational environment, protecting operational assets from cyber threats is different than in an IT environment because you got to make sure that you don't upset the operational aspects of the asset. And so we use AI to detect, to understand what's an operational anomaly versus what's an actual cybersecurity threat or vulnerability. And so using AI to separate the noise from the real vulnerabilities is an application of AI that we've been utilizing in our cybersecurity solutions.
And that cybersecurity solutions business is no doubt a growing business for you guys.
It's in my connected business. It's the fastest growing part of the portfolio, and there's an increasing attention to the operational part of it, protecting critical infrastructure, protecting potentially hazardous facilities. I would argue that the value at stake of lost production, the potential harm to workers, harm to local communities is actually much greater, and therefore it's getting increasing attention in terms of our industrial customers wanting to protect those operations.
Yes. Here's a question from the audience, sort of a question. It's a statement, but we'll make it a question. Is there a concern that AI is being overhyped? Anyone want to respond to that? Of course, we're here today. We're not hyping anything.
I'll dive in. So is there a concern that AI is being overhyped? So I think it's a yes, no. So the potential's there and it's huge, and I think it's all about how you leverage the full set of tools in your toolkit. AI might be the new and shiny one, or it might be one that you already have decades of experience in, and probably both, especially for some of our more established industries out there. But it's really about how do you weave together your sets of technologies in a way to provide, again, value. And just to give an example of that, the hype is real when it comes to a solution we have for cross-border solutions. So if you're a small package, small business that needs to move packages across a border, that can be a very cumbersome task when it comes to knowing all the different custom laws that are out there. We're leveraging AI and natural language models to be able to help predict the harmonized code. That's actually the key to unlock that cross-border. It's part of our next-gen brokerage, and it's a case where the technologies come into play and is creating value, especially for those small, medium businesses that are critical. But are there blog posts out there or a set of expectation management discussions happening? For sure. That's the reality.
Yes. Yes. All of your companies, as we said at the top, have experience in this space, have evolved along with the technology. What advice can you offer to those who are on the verge of implementing AI into their operations?
Yeah, I can start here. So I think the first and foremost is educating your users, right? The change management aspect of it. So as we were mentioning, the first threat is AI going to replace my jobs? No, that's not true. But how is it going to bring that benefit? So that education is extremely important. And second thing is ethical AI. We talked a little bit about the security threats that we are talking about and the safety from Honeywell perspective. But there's an example out there where one of the CPG companies, research and development employee, actually put the research out there saying, I've built a very innovative product which is 10x better than my competitor. Can you tell me which market and segment, customer segment should I target? Now the intention was very simple. Where should I start selling it? But what it did, it actually put all the research and the materials that they were using, which made it 10% better. And it was grabbed for every competitor out there to figure out what they are using and what they are going to come up with. So this is where the training part of it and the ethical AI, the policies, the governance, the rules and regulations that everyone should be following comes into picture. So those are very overlooked. We all jump into talent, we all jump into technology, infrastructure, but I guess the whole education and change management part of it is very critical.
Yes. Kevin, advice, lessons learned?
Yeah, maybe I'll even go back a little bit to your previous question. I do believe there's some hype there, but I have to say I think that AI is here to stay. Yeah. And the thing that's really surprised me is the pace at which it's become a part of there's not a customer that I talk to that doesn't ask the obligatory "what about AI" question. Wow. And so I do think it's here to stay, and I do think that that my advice would be is don't get too far behind the curve. Maybe don't get too far out in front of it, but don't get too far behind it. I do believe for our types of customers, the productivity value at stake is massive in applying AI. I don't think it's a silver bullet, AI eats data, right? And so I think combining AI with a clear understanding of the use cases and how they will create value with an understanding of the domain and the data structures. And then I couldn't agree more that in the end, the way you capture the value is understanding the change management aspects of this type of a technology disruption. So it's not a silver bullet, but I do think the productivity benefits are going to be massive.
Mallory, advice or lessons learned?
Yeah, so I think my co-panelists here have covered it really well. So I would say, it's a time to be excited about the future. And we talked about already on the panel the importance of people, the importance of technology, having that strategy for your data, your analytics, and your AI to create value is critical. And the part that just I think deserves maybe a double click or just another reminder is the importance of trust in your models and responsibility, and that already came out as well. But I want to just say that's something we take seriously at UPS. We've got a leadership framework called our AI guardrails, and that's really a systematic. There's 5 guardrails in place that actually let you, kind of across different functions in the organization, look at how the technology is being applied. So ethics, security, compliance, responsibility across the entire AI development lifecycle, and then a culture of responsibility. So really looking holistically at bringing the different stakeholders together to deliver the value, but do it in a way that keeps your partnership as an organization the kind that can keep you in business for years to come.
Yes. So while we have about a minute, I'll ask you all if you'd like to take a stab at this question, and maybe we've answered this to some extent. Is there one example that you can offer where AI helped you identify a solution that precisely fit the customer's need, desire? Is there anything that comes to mind? Other than helping them decide that they wanted beer when they were also buying diapers, which is a wonderful example.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll dive in and just say, I think we're still kind of seeking those places where you bring it together. The place that has the most potential is our UPS digital umbrella. We're on this quest to become the best small package provider in the world, and that also means being the best logistics partner out there. So you're looking at not just offering delivery, but logistics partnership. So what I think is exciting here is really thinking about any problem that you have to solve in your logistics umbrella. We've got a solution in-house for that. So how do we connect and find some of those places where we can unlock our internal value for customers externally? The example I gave on cross borders, I think a pretty strong example of that. We talked about porch pirates and doing predictions. There's a whole set of problems in inventory management, routing control that AI optimization and others can make a play for. So, yeah.
I can give you an example around energy consumption, energy optimization. Honeywell, we're a controls company it's in our DNA, it's our history. So it's our control systems that operate buildings or warehouses or chemical processing plants, whatever it might be. And obviously there's an imperative that those types of customers have around reducing energy consumption. And so we use AI to optimize the control algorithms to much more dynamically control the usage of energy. And that's something that has economic value in terms of reducing the operating costs of those facilities, but also has society value of less energy equals less carbon. And so there's an example of where, AI is being utilized to, not only economic good, but societal good in terms of carbon reduction.